We're watching a progressive weather pattern unfold across the U.S. this week. This means a wide range of weather conditions countrywide. Tropical weather, severe weather, even winter weather, all possible this week, while some enjoy temperatures in the 80s. In fact, if you look at our weather map here, you can already see our first two systems. That one out there, currently in the southern Rockies, and another one moving across the Pacific Northwest. Up ahead, we're going to break down all the impacts that you can expect in this active week of weather. We'll take you straight to the tropics, where in the latest, Nadine is now crossing Mexico. This is not the major hurricane the hypologists out there would have had you believed, but it may reform into a hurricane as it enters the Pacific later this week. What is closer to a hurricane, and in fact is a hurricane right now, is Oscar, which really came up as a surprise. It developed in a very short amount of time, and since then has become a hurricane impacting the Turks and Caicos Islands. And if we take a closer look at this storm, what you're seeing here is a forecast that doesn't call for anything significant. It's a very small storm, so even these islands like Cuba that it's about to make landfall on, aren't going to allow it to maintain its strength. So this is expected to recurve as a front draped across the eastern U.S. pushes it back out to sea, but impacts for parts of the tropics out there. Now, in addition to the hurricanes that we're tracking, we actually have severe weather as well. And this is your forecast for Sunday, but of course we want to look forward, so we're going to take a closer look at Monday here too. And what we're actually seeing though today, worth noting, is a 5% risk for tornadoes within 25 miles of a point here in New Mexico. That's a decent threat for October, and one that we don't see very commonly. But we can also move this to the next day, and you'll see here for our Monday as we begin the week, we actually have an area of severe weather possible across much of the plains, especially the southern plains, and there is a low tornado chance, especially in Kansas and Nebraska. Wind, though, and hail, the primary concerns here. It's a marginal risk. Most of you will not see severe weather out there, but it is at least something to note, as it's a sign of active weather and a sort of a sign of the changing seasons when you can get these severe weather events whenever you have enough instability, which certainly there is. But worth noting those two things. We have bigger stories too, though, and we're going to take a look at those and how it'll impact the entire U.S. in a more broader view. Now we're going to talk about weather impacting the entire U.S., and this week with that progressive weather pattern, we're going to have a lot of fronts passing through, many of them quick hitters. But if we take a look at what we're starting with here, you're seeing high pressure across pretty much the entire eastern U.S. That's keeping things sunny and nice to kick things off. We talked about that severe weather possibility. That's all thanks to a system out here, and we also have this system coming off the Pacific Northwest. Those are our big players to start the week at least. Move this forward a couple days here. What you see now is that system was in the Northwest actually quickly cutting into the central U.S. Our system that was in the southern Rockies is kind of combining with it out here, really creating a chance for rain across the central U.S. by the middle of the week. Meanwhile, high pressure keeping things clear across the eastern U.S., but we can also take a look at everything else ahead here, and we'll fix our view here so we can get a better idea of what's going on. There we go. So now we're taking a look at the middle of the week, and in the middle of the week here, specifically Wednesday, you can see that system continuing to cross into the central and now entering the eastern U.S. So we're going to see a flip from really sunny skies in the eastern U.S. to start the week to some breeziness and the potential for a little bit of rain once we get to the middle and later days of the week. Meanwhile, that high-pressure system that kept things so nice in the eastern U.S. is actually going to, it's going to be a different one, but it's going to emerge again, high pressure in the central and western U.S. So we basically see a flip from a little bit stormy, a little bit windy in the west and nice in the east to the opposite. Here we are Thursday. You can see that cold front crossing through the eastern U.S. at this point. Meanwhile, high pressure taking over the central U.S. We'll move this into the weekend here because things will stay about the same until we get to around Saturday, Sunday. Looks like a messy map here, doesn't it? But what we're basically watching is more or less we see a bit more bumpiness emerge out here. A couple systems are going to come into the Pacific Northwest, and while these will have a bigger impact on the next week, they are at least going to bring our next change in the pattern as we round off the weekend and into next week. Now, in addition to this, we can also take a look at how that's going to impact the precipitation here. So why don't we pull up that? You'll have a better idea of perhaps, you'll be able to see better, I should say, what is going to occur. And we're going to start here with our surface conditions. What you can see, again, that high pressure system in the eastern U.S. There's some of that rain cutting through the central U.S. on Monday, though. That's our low severe weather risk. And here's our next system coming off the northwest. So here we go. Rain, if you're in the northwest on Monday, some rain in the central part of the U.S., still very sunny in the east. And there's our system cutting through the northern plains now. Again, they sort of phase together. So in the north central U.S., bit of breeziness, perhaps a cool down as we get into the middle days, later days of the week. And you can see that front just doesn't have much moisture on it. So as this cuts into the eastern U.S. here, and it does disrupt the high pressure, but it's not going to bring much rain. Meanwhile, on the back end there's the high pressure again. So as a whole, we're not talking about anything significantly impactful. But if I bring us all the way to the weekend, there's that system I was talking about in the northwest. This is the very end of Sunday now. Again, this will have bigger connotations on next week, but there's some rain, even some snow expected in the mountains out there. So bit of everything. Certainly snow, quite likely in those mountainous areas this time of year as it gets colder. We can also take a look at total rainfall here, and I'll show you that there really is not going to be much to see because it is a dominantly dry week. And if I move this all the way to the end of the week, well, yeah, northwest could see some decent rainfall. That might be a little overdone, but outside of that rain we see in the central U.S., we're not really talking about much. So as a whole, a pretty nice week altogether. We can also take a look at our snowfall too. But do keep in mind it will be breezy at times as these systems, like I said, are quick hitters, and they will cross the U.S. quickly as well. So they'll be in and out, and everyone will be impacted a little bit. But yeah, here we are. There's your snow, perhaps a bit in the Rockies from that severe weather type of setup. And then in the, really in British Columbia, could be some snow in the mountains out there, out towards Alberta as well. But there you go. Not so many impacts this week, but temperatures will fluctuate a lot too. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at those before we wrap things up. So with these progressive weather patterns, temperatures tend to trend up and down pretty aggressively, especially with how quick these systems move. And you'll see that here, starting with our temperature anomalies, and we'll start this on Monday. Again, anywhere you're seeing orange colors, of course, warmer than average. Blue is colder than average. Eastern U.S., north central U.S., much warmer than average. We're talking about record highs in some spots. Certainly, temperatures will be in the 70s and 80s in most of those areas. You're seeing orange from the southeast all the way to the north central U.S. I mean, 80s in Minnesota and Wisconsin this time of year is a big deal. Even in the northeast, it is too. So Monday, very warm, but notice the northwest, a little on the cool side of things. This warmth on Tuesday continues to shift eastwards, and gosh, it'll be such a nice start to the week in the eastern U.S. But once we get into Wednesday, remember that front starts cutting across the central part of the country. That's why you're seeing this cutoff here. That's basically your cold front coming in and chopping out some of the warmth. But still much of the U.S. warmer, and you'll see the western U.S. gets a bit warmer here too towards the end of the week. Meanwhile, the eastern U.S. cools behind that cold front. Things will level out a bit as we head into Friday, but as we get into the weekend, you're going to notice more changes here. Here's your Saturday. Again, not bad in the east, but pretty warm in the west. But as we move into Sunday and that next system begins to enter the Pacific Northwest, again, this will have bigger connotations next week, but there's your cutoff. So enjoy this pattern, soak it in while you get it. It's going to be very warm for much of the U.S., good conditions for getting outside. And certainly that is going to be good for anyone who's trying to see the leaves. We'll take a look at, actually, before we wrap things up, our latest on fall foliage as we approach perhaps the peak week for color. So we'll start with our map here on Monday, of course. Anywhere you're seeing the brown colors, you're past peak. So many of those mountains past peak now, but we're seeing those peak colors spread into some of the major cities. Denver area looking at peak colors out there. And certainly we are talking about what is going to be nice color into Chicago, into bigger cities like Pittsburgh and Philly out there in Pennsylvania. If you're not on the coastline of New England, you're seeing a lot of those great colors a little farther south. And this is perhaps one of the best weeks we're going to have left. Certainly with fall foliage, we've been lucky this year seeing so much dry weather in the fall, and at least in a good chunk of the U.S. And we haven't seen a ton of big wind makers across a good chunk of the U.S. too. So a lot of leaves on those trees. And again, you're seeing just how much of that area, those dark red colors on our map, the oranges as well, good color out there. I'll move this forward one more week, though, and you'll see that overall red area begins to be overtaken by the past peak, the brown. So it's this week and next, perhaps, to really see a lot of those good colors before here we are now into November eventually, and we begin to lose a lot of it. So this week, a lot of good opportunities to get outside, see the leaves. Definitely encourage you to take advantage of that, especially if you're in states like Nebraska, South Dakota, southern Wisconsin's in a good spot. A lot of New England, parts of the mid-Atlantic too. Just a great opportunity, and we only have about a week left of this in many of those areas too. So enjoy, and this really is likely the best week that we'll see, perhaps the best week across the country that we've had in quite some time. So with that, we'll wrap things up. Again, we're getting another quieter week of weather. Good news for us, especially for everyone in the southeast who needs a break from some of the active weather. But take advantage of it. Again, this fall has been pretty nice as a whole. Of course, we had those hurricanes, but for a lot of the U.S., we've been lucky not to see anything significant in terms of weather. Of course, there is that low chance of severe weather to start the week. Just keep an eye on that in the central U.S. But as a whole, take advantage of the fall here. The warmer than average temps, we know it's going to flip pretty soon. We did just get our winter outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. Maybe we'll do a separate video on that pretty soon. But of course, not everyone's going to be looking at a mild winter. So enjoy what you have now. Get outside, see the leaves, and have a great week. Enjoy your favorite college football teams. We're getting to that time of year. I know I'm watching Penn State pretty closely right now, so hoping for a good season. But if your team isn't doing well, hopefully the weather's nice where you are, and we'll see you again back here next week.